My name is Elena and I am 34 years old. I had just heard my parents whisper, "Your sister deserves it," while handing her the property and expecting me to keep paying the mortgage. Something snapped inside me. The humiliation tasted like metal. I had been the one who cleaned their messes, paid their bills, took care of everything when they were in the hospital, and still they treated me like a stranger. My sister smiled as if she had won a prize. They didn't know I had proof. They didn't know I had leverage. They didn't know the house wasn't their final card. Before I continue, tell me your country and the time right now. I used to think families had seasons. That love would come around again if I just waited long enough. But in our house, the sun never rose for me. It belonged to my sister, Mara, from the moment she opened her eyes. When we were little, my mother would brush Mara's hair in the kitchen while I stood at the sink, washing dishes too heavy for my small hands. "You're older," she would say, "you should help." I was 9. Mara was 6. Every compliment, every gift, every small tenderness gravitated toward her like a law of nature. I became invisible by habit. My report cards were folded and forgotten, while hers were framed on the wall. My father used to say, "Mara has promise. You have duty." I learned early that love had conditions, and mine never quite met them. As adults, the pattern didn't break, it calcified. When my parents retired, I became their errand girl. Groceries, utilities, hospital appointments, my weekends disappeared into their needs. I never complained out loud, but the resentment fermented quietly inside me, like something sour stored too long. Mara, meanwhile, lived like a princess of convenience. My parents co-signed her first car. They furnished her apartment. When she lost her job, they let her move back into the family house, the one I was helping to pay for. It wasn't supposed to be this way. When I first took the mortgage, my father told me, "We'll all chip in." It sounded like partnership. But soon the we became you. They made excuses, pension delays, health bills, forgotten promises. I covered the gaps because I believed loyalty would be remembered. That's the thing about loyalty, it's often mistaken for stupidity. Mara started decorating the house as if it already belonged to her. She filled the living room with white furniture I hated, replaced the curtains I bought, and told guests, "My parents wanted it this way." She said "my parents," as if I wasn't part of that sentence. One night, I overheard them talking in the dining room. My father's voice was low, proud. "She'll have the house eventually. It's the least we can do for her." My mother agreed softly. "Elena understands. She has her own life." But I didn't. I had bills. I had debt. I had the same house dragging my bank account into the red every month. I stood in the hallway, invisible again, listening to them plan a future where I didn't exist. My name didn't come up once, not even as an afterthought. Later, Mara came out smiling, carrying a folder. "Thanks for everything, sis," she said, brushing past me. Her perfume filled the air, expensive and sweet. "You always make things easier." I didn't ask what was in the folder. I told myself I didn't want to know. But that lie only lasted until the next morning when I saw my mother ironing papers on the kitchen table, property tax documents, with only one listed owner. Not me. Mara. I wanted to believe it was a clerical error. That maybe they were just updating records. But then my father said, "Once it's finalized, it'll be easier to transfer everything." Everything. I remember my hands shaking as I scrubbed the dishes that night, the water scalding. My reflection in the window looked like a stranger's, a woman hollowed out by effort, still waiting for fairness that would never come. I thought about every sacrifice, the nights I worked overtime to keep the mortgage current, the years I paid property insurance, the holidays I skipped because the house needs priority. And yet, the phrase that echoed in my head was my father's from years ago. "Mara has promise. You have duty." Maybe that was the truth all along. I wasn't a daughter. I was their insurance policy, emotional, financial, convenient. Still, I stayed. Because leaving felt like surrender. Because I wanted to believe love could still mean something. But the universe doesn't send miracles, it sends moments. And mine came the day I checked the mail. Among bills and flyers, there was a letter from the county assessor's office, addressed to property owner, Mara Vance. My heart stuttered. I stood on the porch, letter trembling in my hand, the sky heavy and gray above me. That was when the truth stopped whispering and started screaming. I wasn't part of the house anymore. I was a tenant in a life I had built. I walked inside, past the smell of fresh paint and candles I hadn't bought. Mara was on the couch, laughing at something on her phone. My parents were in the kitchen, making tea, content, oblivious. And I realized something cold and sharp. They didn't just forget me. They erased me. The laughter from the living room turned faint as blood pounded in my ears. My world narrowed to a single thought, pulsing and dangerous. They think I won't fight back. They're wrong. That night, behind the thin wall between our bedrooms, I heard my sister whisper on the phone, "Once the transfer clears, I'll finally be free of her." I stopped feeling at home the moment I stepped onto the porch the next morning. The air itself seemed to reject me. My key stuck in the door as if the lock already knew I wasn't welcome. Inside, Mara's laughter spilled from the kitchen. She was making pancakes, my mother's favorite. My father was reading the paper, nodding to her jokes. No one looked up when I entered. "Morning," I said quietly. My mother finally turned her head. "Oh, you're here. We thought you were staying at your apartment today." "My apartment?" I repeated. "This is my address." She blinked at me like I'd said something absurd. "You're always out working, dear. You practically live there anyway." The sentence stung more than I expected. Practically live there. I wanted to scream that the only reason I worked so much was because they expected me to shoulder the mortgage, the very mortgage they now called hers. But instead, I poured coffee in silence. The kitchen looked different. The wallpaper had changed. The family photos on the wall were rearranged, one of me was gone. I scanned the frames until I found it lying face down in a drawer by the sink. My sister's wedding portrait had taken its place. When I asked about it, Mara just shrugged. "We're redecorating. Nothing personal. Nothing personal." That phrase haunted me for days. I began noticing the small ways they erased me. My father started referring to the house as Mara's place. My mother began introducing me to guests as our other daughter, the one who lives elsewhere. At dinner, they discussed renovations and budgets without including me. I'd try to speak, but their words rolled over mine like a tide. One afternoon, I overheard my mother say to a friend, "Elena's doing fine. She doesn't need anything from us." I wanted to burst in and shout that I did need something, acknowledgement, gratitude, at least honesty. But I stayed in the hallway, clutching a folder of receipts that proved every payment I'd made. It felt pathetic, holding evidence of my worth. The final blow came a week later. I found a bank letter on the counter, unopened, addressed to primary owner. Out of habit, I tore it open, only to freeze when I saw the name. Mara Vance. The paper trembled in my hands. Mortgage balance, due date, signature line, none of it had my name. Yet I was still the one whose account was being debited every month. My money. Her name. I stormed into the living room, waving the letter. "Why is this addressed to you?" Mara didn't even flinch. She muted the TV and said calmly, "Because it's my house." I laughed, an ugly, bitter sound. "Your house? I've been paying for this for 6 years." She tilted her head. "You were helping. You never said you wanted ownership." "I didn't think I needed to." I snapped. "We had an agreement." My father appeared in the doorway, arms crossed. "Don't raise your voice, Elena. You've been living here rent-free." The words hit like a slap. "Rent-free?" I whispered. "I paid everything." He sighed, the way people sigh at a slow child. "Mara has responsibilities now. She's married, she has plans. You're single, you'll be fine. I wanted to ask if that was my punishment. That I didn't marry someone fast enough to make me valuable. But my throat burned, and no words came. Later, in the solitude of my room, I tried to calculate how much I'd spent, down payments, insurance, maintenance, repairs. I wrote numbers until they blurred together. Each one represented trust, naivety, and something far worse, hope. When I walked downstairs again, my mother was serving dessert. "Don't look so gloomy," she said. "You'll get your own place soon." This house was always meant for Mara. There it was, the sentence I'd always feared, spoken so casually over pie. Always meant for Mara. I didn't reply. I just nodded and left. The next day, I returned with my arms full of cleaning supplies. My mother frowned. "What are you doing here again?" "I'm cleaning," I said. "I'm still paying for this place." She laughed softly. "You don't have to pretend, Elena. It's time you let go." That was the moment I understood, they weren't confused. They were deliberate. This wasn't misunderstanding or poor communication. It was rewriting history while I was still alive to watch it. That night, Mara hosted friends. They sat in the living room, drinking wine, talking about her property value. I listened from upstairs as one guest asked, "So your sister's name was ever on it?" Mara replied, "No, she just helped out when times were tough. She's good at that kind of thing, helping. Helping. Like a volunteer in her own life." I wanted to run downstairs and throw every receipt in her face. But I didn't. I stayed in my room, staring at the ceiling, heart pounding. Because anger wasn't enough anymore. I needed something else, something sharp, legal, undeniable. When the guests left, I walked down quietly. The dining table was covered in papers. I recognized my father's handwriting on one of them, figures, signatures, and a date circled in red. Transfer finalization, Friday. That's when the panic turned into resolve. If they could plan behind my back, I could do the same. I wasn't their obedient daughter anymore. I was a creditor collecting a debt they didn't know they owed. As I walked upstairs, I heard my mother's voice from the kitchen. "It's for the best. Elena will understand eventually." No, I thought. Elena will remember. That night, I opened my laptop, searched the county registry, and saw it with my own eyes. The title change was already filed. Mara's wedding was the first time I understood what it meant to fund my own humiliation. It started with a phone call 2 years ago. "You'll help, right?" she said, her voice dripping with the assumption of yes. "You're the organized one." I was sitting at my desk in the middle of a 12-hour shift, surrounded by bills. I should have said no. But the word caught in my throat like guilt. So I said yes. From that moment, I became the invisible engine of her perfect day. I handled the caterers, the venue deposits, the dress fittings, the floral arrangements. My parents called me their miracle worker. Mara called me her backup plan. Every receipt had my name. Every check had my signature. But on the wedding day, every thank you skipped over me. I remember standing near the cake, adjusting my sister's veil before she walked down the aisle. She looked radiant, spoiled, beautiful, smug. My mother was crying. My father held her hand. Guests murmured about what a wonderful family they were. And me? I was the shadow beside the altar. When the photographer gathered the family for pictures, I was asked to hold the train of her dress out of frame. Literally cut from the memory. I smiled through it, telling myself love meant sacrifice. That someday they'd see me, even if it wasn't today. After the ceremony, I overheard one of my mother's friends say, "You must be so proud. You spared no expense." And my mother smiled, and said, "Of course. We wanted everything perfect for our daughter." I felt the words stab under my ribs. Our daughter. Singular. That night, when the lights dimmed and the music softened, my ex-husband found me by the bar. His tie was loose, his expression drunk on disappointment. "You do realize you're not even living your own life anymore," he said. "You're just their errand girl." I laughed bitterly. "Someone has to keep things together." He looked at me, tired and sad. "Not at the cost of your soul, Elena." By the end of that night, we stopped being a couple. He left quietly, like someone escaping a fire too slow to notice it was burning. I stayed to clean up spilled champagne and scattered petals, my sister's dream, my undoing. Years later, I still found traces of that day in the house, a framed wedding photo in the hallway, the same smile that had cost me my marriage. Every time I walked by it, I felt smaller. When I confronted my parents about repaying the wedding costs, they dismissed it. "You offered," my father said. "Don't make it about money." Money. As if it wasn't the only language they spoke fluently. But I kept paying. The mortgage, the taxes, the maintenance, all under the illusion that one day, they'd recognize me as part of something that mattered. Then came the night Mara showed me her dream renovations. She flipped through magazines, pointing at pictures of kitchens and balconies. "We'll redo the master suite first," she said. "You don't mind, right? You don't really use that space." I froze. "You don't really use that space?" As if I were an intruder renting corners of her palace. I asked, "And how exactly are you paying for that?" She smiled. "Dad said we'll refinance the mortgage." "It's fine." I stared at her, realizing she didn't even understand the words she was saying. I was still legally tied to that mortgage. If she refinanced without me, it was fraud. If she did it with me, it would sink me deeper. Either way, I was disposable. Later that night, I went through my old financial folders, loan statements, closing costs, tax forms. The numbers screamed betrayal. For 6 years, I'd kept everyone's life comfortable at the expense of my own. It wasn't charity anymore. It was theft disguised as tradition. The next morning, I sat across from my parents in the living room. "I want transparency," I said, calm but shaking inside. "I want to know what's happening with the house." My father didn't look up from his newspaper. "Don't be dramatic." My mother sighed. "Why do you always assume the worst?" "Because the worst keeps being true," I said quietly. Mara came down the stairs, hair wet from her morning shower, humming. "Oh, are we talking about my house again?" she teased. The words hung heavy in the air. Something broke in me then, not loudly, but permanently. I stood up, walked to the kitchen, and saw a stack of envelopes on the counter. Bills. One of them, half open, had the familiar mortgage logo. My heart pounded as I pulled it out. It wasn't the balance that froze me. It was the address on file. The correspondence address had been changed to Mara's name. Every official notice would now go to her. She'd cut me off from my own paper trail. That night, as I tried to sleep, I heard her on the phone again. Her tone was casual, smug. "Don't worry," she said to someone. "The title's almost through. I'll be the legal owner soon." She doesn't even know how it works. My blood ran cold. For the first time, I realized she wasn't naive. She was strategic. All those years of pretending to be the innocent golden child were just rehearsal. And I had been the stagehand keeping the spotlight on her. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, feeling something sharp and unfamiliar rise inside me. It wasn't grief anymore. It wasn't even rage. It was clarity. They thought I was powerless because I never fought. They forgot what I'd built, every receipt, every transaction, every recorded call with the bank. Maybe I wasn't the golden child. But I was the one who left a paper trail. As dawn broke, my phone buzzed, a new email from the bank. The subject line read, "Change of ownership inquiry, action required." The day they said it out loud, the air felt thicker than usual, like the house itself was holding its breath. I'd gone there after work, exhausted but determined to clear the confusion. The email from the bank had shaken me, but I convinced myself there had to be a mistake. Maybe the transfer hadn't gone through. Maybe someone just filled in a wrong name. I still believed my parents wouldn't do that to me, not really. When I walked in, the three of them were sitting in the living room. My father with his newspaper, my mother knitting, Mara scrolling on her phone like a queen surrounded by her servants. "Can we talk?" I asked, standing by the doorway. No one looked up. "About the house," I added. My father exhaled, lowering the paper slowly. "Elena, we've been expecting this conversation." Something in his tone made me dizzy. My mother placed her knitting aside and said softly, "We didn't want to hurt you, dear, but it's time you understood how things are." "How things are?" I repeated. Mara smirked without looking up. "Don't make it dramatic." I turned to my father. "What's going on? Why is my name disappearing from documents I paid for?" He folded his paper and looked at me with the calm detachment of a man announcing a weather report. "Because, Elena, your sister deserves it. You've had your turn helping this family. It's her time now." The words didn't sound real. They hit like sound traveling underwater, slow, muted, then devastating. My heart stumbled. "She deserves it?" I managed to say. "I'm the one who paid every month. I'm the one who—" "Enough." His voice cracked like a whip. "You always bring up money as if that's all that matters. This family isn't about debts." I laughed bitterly. "No, it's about deception." My mother stood up, hands trembling. "Elena, don't start. We all know you're independent. You can take care of yourself. Mara's just starting her life." I stared at her, waiting for the punchline. Starting her life? She's 31 and unemployed. "She's married," my mother said sharply, as though that word was a credential. "You should be happy for her." Happy? That word tasted like poison. I turned to my sister. "And you? You're fine taking something I paid for?" She finally looked up, her eyes glittering with unearned confidence. "I'm not taking it. They're giving it." I could barely breathe. "You mean stealing?" She shrugged. "Call it what you want." My father's voice deepened. "Elena, don't speak to your sister like that. You should be grateful we even included you in this family as long as we did." That last sentence didn't land, it detonated. Included me. As if I were a guest they'd tolerated out of obligation. I took a step back. My hands were shaking so violently I had to press them together. "So that's it?" I whispered. "After everything I've done, you're just cutting me out?" "You make it sound cruel," my mother said. "We're doing what's fair." "Fair?" I choked on the word. "You're letting her live for free while I paid for this place. How is that fair?" My father rose from his chair. "Watch your tone, Elena. You've always had a temper. This is why we can't trust you with responsibility." The room blurred for a second. My pulse thundered in my ears. I wasn't sure if I was shaking from fury or disbelief. Mara leaned back on the couch, smirking. "Don't worry, sis. You'll land on your feet. You always do." I wanted to scream, to tear the smugness off her face. But instead, something else happened. I went completely still. There was no point arguing. Their decision wasn't new, it was just finally spoken aloud. "Fine," I said quietly. "If she deserves it, then she can deserve the bills too." I grabbed my bag and turned to leave. My mother's voice followed me. "Elena, don't be childish. You can't just walk away." I looked over my shoulder. "Watch me." Outside, the air felt foreign. My vision tunneled as I reached the car. I sat there for minutes, gripping the steering wheel, staring at the house, my house, through the windshield. The lights glowed warm behind the curtains, but it no longer looked like a home. It looked like a crime scene. My phone buzzed. A message from my father. "Don't make this ugly. You'll regret it." I deleted it without replying. When I finally drove off, the tears came, violent, uncontrollable, endless. I pulled over halfway home, chest heaving, realizing I had nowhere to go. Not really. The apartment I rented was barely livable, filled with furniture I'd salvaged from their attic. I had built my entire existence around being useful to people who saw me as disposable. I cried until my throat went raw, until there were no more tears left. Then, beneath the exhaustion, a thought surfaced, cold, steady, absolute. They just declared war. I wasn't ready yet, but something deep inside me whispered that I would be. As I wiped my face, my phone buzzed again, this time from an unknown number. The text read, "Congratulations, Mara Vance. Property transfer completed." The next morning, I went back to the house like a fool chasing closure. I hadn't slept. My pillow was soaked with the residue of disbelief, but a small, stupid part of me still thought maybe they'd reconsider. Maybe my father's message was heat-of-the-moment cruelty. Maybe my mother would open the door, see my face, and remember I was her daughter. Instead, when I knocked, Mara opened the door halfway and blocked the entrance with her body. She was still in her robe, coffee cup in hand, hair pulled back like she'd been waiting for me. "Oh," she said coolly. "You came back." "I live here," I said. She smiled faintly. "Not anymore." Her words sliced cleaner than any shout. I stared at her hand on the doorknob, her nails painted a shade of crimson I'd seen before, the color of quiet war. Behind her, I could see the living room. My mother was at the table, arranging flowers. My father was nowhere in sight. Neither of them looked up. "I just want to talk," I whispered. "There's nothing to talk about," she said. "You made it clear you don't agree with our decision." "That's fine. But you can't stay here and cause tension." I laughed bitterly. "Tension? You mean existence?" She raised an eyebrow. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be." "Let me in, Mara." "No." That single syllable broke something ancient in me. Not the word itself, but the ease of it, the way it rolled off her tongue like a habit. Like she'd been practicing it her whole life. I looked past her and said loudly, "Mom?" My mother's head turned. Her eyes flicked toward me, then away, like the glance one gives to a stranger asking for directions. "Don't start drama in front of the neighbors," she murmured, arranging the bouquet. The air left my lungs. "Drama?" I said softly. "You stole my home." My mother sighed, exasperated. "Elena, please. Don't be theatrical. You always exaggerate." Mara stepped outside, closing the door behind her. "You're embarrassing yourself," she whispered. I stared at her. "Do you even feel guilty?" "Why would I?" she said, smiling. "You chose to help. You chose to pay. You were always so desperate to prove you were better than me. Consider this your reward, you've built something beautiful for me." It wasn't what she said that stunned me. It was how she meant it. With utter calm. Like I was a stepping stone she'd always known she'd step over. "I'm warning you," I said, voice trembling. "You don't know what you're doing." Her smile sharpened. "Actually, I think I do." And with that, she stepped back inside and shut the door in my face. The click of the lock sounded like a verdict. I stood there for a long time, numb. The winter air cut through my coat. My hands went cold, but I couldn't move. From behind the curtain, I saw the faint movement of my mother's silhouette, closing the blinds. That was it. I was officially on the outside. I walked to my car, but instead of getting in, I sat on the curb, staring at the mailbox that still had my name faintly printed under a peeling sticker. For years, I'd thought that name meant belonging. Now it looked like graffiti. I wanted to scream, but the tears came first, ugly, heaving sobs that clawed out of my chest. I pressed my palms to my eyes until I saw colors. No one came out. No one asked if I was okay. I must have sat there for an hour before a voice startled me. "Elena?" It was Mrs. Hanley, our elderly neighbor. She stood on her porch, wrapped in a shawl, concern in her eyes. "I heard yelling," she said. "Are you all right?" I wiped my face quickly. "Just family stuff." She frowned. "They're inside celebrating. Something about a title change." My throat closed. "Celebrating?" She nodded. "Your sister said the house is officially hers now. Your parents seemed proud." I managed a nod, thanked her, and climbed into my car. As soon as I shut the door, I let out a sound that didn't sound human, half laugh, half scream. Celebrating. They were celebrating while I sat on the curb like an unwanted guest. Driving away felt like moving through fog. The city blurred past me, people with groceries, kids on bikes, everyone with homes to return to. I kept driving until I reached the edge of town, where the streetlights thinned. I parked near a small diner and sat staring at the neon sign flickering open in pink light. I wasn't hungry. I just didn't know where else to go. Inside, I ordered black coffee and scrolled through my bank app. There it was again, the mortgage payment, drafted automatically from my account, even though the property was no longer mine. I wanted to throw the phone across the table. I did the math in my head. If I canceled the payments, the bank would chase me. If I kept paying, I was funding their celebration. Either way, I was trapped. When I got back to my apartment that night, the silence felt heavier than before. The walls seemed to echo with every word my family had thrown at me. I sank onto the bed, shoes still on, and stared at the ceiling. They had taken my house. My money. My history. And yet the part that hurt most was realizing they hadn't even hesitated. I checked my phone, no missed calls, no texts, no apologies. Just emptiness. For days, I didn't leave my apartment. The mail piled up. My job started to slip through my fingers. I ignored calls from coworkers. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that door shutting in my face. But on the 5th day, something new arrived, an envelope from the bank, marked urgent. My heart sank before I opened it. Late payment warning. I was still legally responsible. Even now, they hadn't removed my name from the debt, only the ownership. So they got the house, and I got the burden. I laughed, a hollow, bitter sound. Somewhere between despair and awakening, I realized this wasn't over. They thought they'd locked me out, but in the eyes of the law, the house still had my fingerprints all over it. They wanted me gone. They wanted me quiet. But I wasn't either anymore. As I held the warning letter, my phone rang, the bank calling, asking if I wanted to discuss payment options on the property under your name. The voice on the phone was calm, almost soothing. "Ms. Vance, this is Patricia from Landmark Bank. I'm calling regarding the mortgage on your property. We've noticed a delay in your recent payment." For a moment, I couldn't speak. The words tangled in my throat. "My property?" I finally said. "Yes, ma'am," she replied. "The residence on Birchwood Lane. We've tried reaching the primary contact on file, also you, but haven't received a response." My pulse spiked. "Primary contact?" "There's been a mistake," I said quickly. "The ownership was transferred. It's under my sister's name now." There was a short pause on the line. "Not according to our system," Patricia said. "You're still listed as the borrower of record and the responsible party for payments. Would you like to discuss your options to avoid default?" My vision blurred. I clutched the phone tighter. "So you're telling me, they changed the ownership, but the debt is still mine?" "I'm afraid so, Ms. Vance." I hung up. The phone slipped from my hand and hit the carpet. I sat there, staring at nothing, the silence pressing into my skull. For days after that call, I functioned like a ghost. I went to work, smiled when people spoke to me, nodded when my boss gave instructions. But inside, everything was collapsing, quietly, efficiently, like a building scheduled for demolition. Every time I checked my phone, there was another payment notification, another deduction, another reminder that I was financing my own exile. I tried to call my parents. No answer. I sent texts, simple, pleading ones. Please call me. We need to talk. You left me with the debt. Silence. Then, a week later, my mother finally responded. Elena, stop making this ugly. We did what's best for everyone. Move on. Move on. As if betrayal were a neighborhood you could drive out of. That night, I walked the streets until my legs ached. I stood in front of the house from across the street, hidden under the shadow of a maple tree. The curtains were drawn, but I could see silhouettes moving inside, Mara, my mother, maybe my father. Laughter drifted faintly through the window. They were eating dinner. Together. Peaceful. While I was drowning under their debt. I gripped the bark of the tree until it dug into my palms. You don't get to laugh, I whispered. My voice broke. Not while I'm paying for it. A dog barked nearby, startling me back to reality. I turned and walked away, heart pounding, eyes burning. Over the next few weeks, everything blurred. My apartment became a battlefield of unopened envelopes. The bank's letters grew sharper in tone, payment due, urgent, risk of foreclosure. I started having panic attacks at night. My hands would go numb, my breath would catch. At work, I couldn't focus. One afternoon, my manager called me into her office. Elena, she said gently, you've been off lately. Are you okay? I wanted to say no. I wanted to tell her my family had stolen my life and left me with the receipts. But the words stuck. Just tired, I murmured. She nodded, unconvinced. Take a few days off. I walked out, barely holding it together. That weekend, I went back to my apartment and opened a bottle of cheap wine. I drank straight from it, letting the numbness creep in. The city outside my window blurred into streaks of light. Around midnight, I pulled out the old photo albums, family trips, birthdays, Christmas mornings. In every picture, Mara was centered, glowing, radiant. I was always somewhere near the edge, half-turned or cropped out. Even in memories, I was an afterthought. I don't know when I started crying. It wasn't the sharp, sudden kind this time. It was slow, heavy, like my body was emptying itself of years of silence. At some point, I fell asleep on the floor. The next morning, there was a voicemail waiting. My father's voice. Elena, stop contacting the bank. You're making things complicated. You should be grateful we're giving you space. Grateful. That word hit me harder than the rest. I wasn't grateful. I was done. I called the bank again. This time, I asked for every document, every signature, every form. The agent hesitated but eventually sent digital copies to my email. I opened them and scrolled through page after page until I saw it, my signature, my name, my payments. All intact. Then I saw the transfer document. No legal notarization. No approval from the lender. Just a family arrangement. It wasn't legitimate. Not in the eyes of the law. My pulse steadied for the first time in weeks. They thought they'd destroyed me. But they'd been sloppy. Arrogant. Reckless. I printed every page and laid them on the floor, one by one, like puzzle pieces forming a map. The deeper I looked, the clearer the pattern became. They hadn't taken the house from me. They'd borrowed trouble. By the time dawn light bled through the curtains, my despair had transformed into something new, quiet purpose. I called the bank one last time. I need a property lawyer, I said. Someone who handles disputed ownership. The woman on the line paused. Do you have documentation? Yes, I said, voice steady. I have everything. The next morning, my phone buzzed with a voicemail from an unfamiliar number, a woman's voice saying, "This is Attorney Clark. I reviewed your file. You may have more rights than they realize." When I met Attorney Clark, I was running on caffeine, anger, and the fragile kind of hope that feels like grief in disguise. Her office was small but elegant, book stacked in deliberate chaos, faint scent of cedar and ink. She had sharp eyes that didn't miss much, and a voice that could slice through denial like glass. "Sit down, Elena," she said, motioning to the chair across from her. "You brought the documents?" I nodded and placed the folder on her desk. It was thick, 6 years' worth of statements, signed agreements, and emails I had printed at 2 in the morning while shaking. She opened it slowly, scanning each page with quiet concentration. The only sounds were the rustle of paper and the ticking of a clock that seemed louder with every passing second. When she finally looked up, she said something that made my stomach twist. "You own the house." I blinked. I what?" She pushed the loan document toward me. "The original purchase agreement lists you as the sole borrower and the primary titleholder. Your parents and sister are not legally associated with the financing. The only name that matters here, legally, financially, and contractually, is yours." I stared at the document. My own signature stared back at me, familiar and foreign all at once. "But they changed the title," I whispered. Clark nodded. "They tried to. Without lender authorization, it's invalid. You can't transfer ownership of a mortgaged property without the bank's consent. What they did isn't just unethical, it's fraudulent." The word fraudulent hummed in my chest like electricity. She leaned forward, eyes sharp. "Tell me everything." So I did. I told her about the favoritism, the years of manipulation, the mortgage payments, the deception, every humiliation, every "you should be grateful." I told her about the day they said Mara deserved it. I told her about the letter from the bank, the locked door, the laughter behind the blinds. When I finished, Clark sat back in her chair, expression unreadable. "Do you have proof of payment?" she asked. I slid another envelope across the desk. Every transaction. Every auto debit. Every statement. She scanned a few pages and let out a low whistle. "They've been living off you for years." I felt tears sting my eyes, not from sadness but from the validation of being seen. "So what now?" Clark folded her hands. "Now, we take it back." I swallowed hard. "Won't that destroy them?" Her gaze softened just slightly. "Elena, they already destroyed you. What we're doing is reconstruction." The words hit deep. Reconstruction. That's what I'd been craving all along, not revenge, not even justice. Just the chance to rebuild without their shadows over me. She continued, her tone practical. "First, we gather everything, emails, receipts, call records. I'll contact the county clerk to verify the fraudulent title change. We'll file for a property injunction to freeze any sale or transfer attempts. Once that's in motion, they can't touch it without your consent." I nodded, gripping the edge of the chair. "And then?" "Then we file a civil claim. Compensation for payments, emotional distress, damages, fraud. It'll be ugly, Elena. Family cases always are. But if you're ready, we can make them answer for every cent and every lie." My breath came shallow. I wasn't ready, but I wanted to be. "I'm in," I said quietly. Clark gave a short nod. "Good. Keep everything. Don't confront them yet. Let them think you're still powerless." I left her office that day feeling something I hadn't felt in months, certainty. The city looked different when I stepped outside. Colder, but clearer. The sky had that kind of washed-out blue that follows a storm. My phone buzzed with a message from Mara. "Hope you're finally calming down. I'm redecorating the living room. Maybe you can visit, if you behave." I laughed out loud on the street, the sound shocking even to me. They had no idea. That night, I pulled the old loan contract out again, tracing my signature with my finger. I remembered the day I signed it. My father had insisted on it. "You're more stable, Elena," he'd said. "We'll all contribute." I'd believed him. I thought being responsible meant being loved. But now, that same responsibility was my weapon. I spent hours that night gathering digital backups, emails confirming payments, screenshots from my bank app, old messages where my mother thanked me for handling everything. Every file I saved felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. By midnight, my living room floor was covered in papers, each one proof that I wasn't crazy, that I hadn't imagined the exploitation. I picked up one old statement from the first year, before the rot had spread so deep. It was dated 6 years ago, my handwriting still neat, optimistic. I'd written in the corner, "For the family. For us." Reading it now made me laugh. Us had always meant them. I wasn't crying anymore. I felt cold, calm, focused. They thought I was broken, finished, forgotten. But I was just beginning. My phone lit up again, Attorney Clark's text. I just checked the title office records. You're still the legal owner of record. They don't know it yet. Don't tell them. The following week was a blur of signatures, silence, and secrets. Clark called it the preparation stage. I called it the part where I finally learned what power feels like. Every morning, I woke up before dawn, poured bitter coffee, and reviewed documents with her over video calls. She'd highlight sections in yellow, circle signatures, mark timestamps. "We're building your shield," she'd say. "But also your sword." It was strange, hearing someone speak about my life like a case file. But that distance was comforting. Clark didn't pity me. She strategized me. On the third day, she leaned forward on the screen, her voice crisp. "Elena, listen carefully. Legally, you hold all leverage. The title transfer they attempted is void. You're still the owner. But don't reveal that yet. Let them believe they've succeeded. When they act on that belief, when they try to sell or refinance, we strike." Her tone made my skin prickle. "How?" She smiled faintly. "By letting them hang themselves with their own signatures." I took notes furiously, my hand trembling. Every sentence felt like a small resurrection. After our call, I sat in silence, staring at my laptop screen. For the first time in months, I didn't feel like a victim. I felt like an architect rebuilding from ruin. That afternoon, I drove past the house again. I told myself it was to keep track, to see if any for sale signs appeared, but really, I just wanted to look. The curtains were open this time. Mara was inside, on the couch, feet up, drinking wine. My mother hovered near her, folding laundry. There was laughter again, soft, smug, the kind that made my stomach twist. I rolled down the window, watching from across the street. It struck me that they looked like actors rehearsing a play in a set I had built. Then Mara's husband, Ethan, walked in, suit jacket draped over his arm. He kissed her cheek, whispered something, and they both laughed. The image burned. I drove away before they could see me, hands gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles went white. That night, Clark called again. "I've drafted the first legal notice," she said. "It's not to be sent yet, but it's ready. It states your ownership claim, mortgage records, payment trail, and the invalidity of their transfer. Once filed, they'll be frozen out of every transaction until the court decides." I exhaled shakily. "You make it sound easy." "It's not," she said. "They'll fight. Expect manipulation, guilt, tears. They'll accuse you of betrayal." "Betrayal," I repeated bitterly. "Their favorite word." She nodded. "Then you know how to handle it." After the call, I printed the draft notice. It was only a few pages, but it felt heavier than any object I'd ever held. At the bottom, under plaintiff, Elena Vance, was my own signature, clean, precise, final. I placed it on my table like a holy thing. For years, I'd signed documents for them. Now I'd finally signed one for myself. The next morning, my phone buzzed with a message from my mother. "Your sister says she might sell the house soon. We hope you won't make things difficult. It's time to let go." I stared at the words for a long time before typing back. Let go? I haven't even started holding on. I didn't send it. I deleted it. Clark's advice echoed in my mind, let them think you're weak. So I wrote instead. I understand. Do what you think is best. It was the first lie that tasted sweet. 2 days later, Clark scheduled an in-person meeting. Her office smelled faintly of rain that morning. I spoke with the bank, she said. They confirmed your sole borrower status. They also flagged irregular activity on the property account, attempts to change mailing information, contact names, and even withdrawal authorizations. My stomach tightened. By them? She nodded. Your sister and your parents. They used your login information at some point, which complicates things, but also strengthens your case. It shows intent. Intent. The word pulsed in my head like a drum. Clark tapped the desk with her pen. I want you to do something for me, Elena. Keep acting normal. Visit them. Smile. Let them speak freely. Record everything. I hesitated. Record? Yes. California's a two-party consent state, but we'll work within limits. Keep voice notes, take written summaries. We need their words, not just your pain. I nodded slowly. And if they find out? She smiled thinly. Then we'll already have what we need. That weekend, I did exactly as she said. I went to the house, knocked on the door, and waited for Mara to open it. Her expression shifted from surprise to irritation. What are you doing here? I forced a smile. I just wanted to check in. No hard feelings. She crossed her arms. Really? I shrugged, pretending defeat. You won. It's over. I just want to help with the last few payments before you finalize the transfer. That line got her attention. That would be great, she said quickly. We'll handle the paperwork soon. I kept my tone light. Perfect. Just let me know when it's ready. Behind my back, my phone recorded every word. Later, in my car, I played it back. Her voice was crystal clear, we'll handle the paperwork soon. The exact phrase Clark told me to wait for. I sent the audio to her that night. 10 minutes later, she texted back. Excellent. That's evidence of intent to defraud. Keep collecting. We're almost ready. Almost ready. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, heart pounding, not from fear this time, but anticipation. For months, I'd been suffocating under guilt, heartbreak, confusion. Now every emotion felt sharpened into purpose. They thought they'd silenced me. But silence can be a setup. The next morning, Clark's email appeared. Drafting motion for property freeze order. Do not alert them yet. Timing is everything. Silence became my disguise. I wore it like armor, smooth, invisible, and impenetrable. I followed Clark's instructions to the letter. No confrontation. No warning. Just observation. Every visit to the house became a small performance. I smiled, nodded, and played the role of the resigned daughter, the one who understood. It made them comfortable, talkative. And when people feel safe, they confess. One evening, I brought over groceries as an excuse to stop by. Mara was in the kitchen, barefoot, swirling wine in a glass. You didn't have to do this, she said, glancing at the bags. I wanted to help, I replied softly. You've got so much on your plate. She smirked, taking another sip. Well, someone has to be responsible around here. Mom and Dad don't know half the paperwork I've handled. Oh? I asked, feigning curiosity. She laughed. Yeah, they don't even understand how I got the deed transferred. It's all online now, super easy. I just filled in the forms. No one checks anything if it looks official. My stomach twisted, but my face stayed neutral. You're amazing, I said, and meant it, in the most venomous sense. Later that night, as I sat in my car parked down the block, I played back her words on my recorder. The tone, the arrogance, it was all there. Proof. Every sentence was a brick in the wall I was building around her lies. Over the next few weeks, I gathered more. My father ranting on the phone about how she better not back out now. My mother whispering to a friend, Elena will forgive us eventually, she always does. I didn't, and I wouldn't. Each recording was dated, labeled, and backed up in triplicate. Clark once said, "Revenge isn't loud, Elena. It's paperwork." Now I understood. Still, pretending submission had its cost. During dinners, I'd watch them celebrate their good fortune. My father toasted Mara's new start. My mother gushed about how proud she was of her responsible daughter. I'd sit there, sipping water, my pulse drumming beneath calm skin. Sometimes Mara would glance at me with a smirk that said she knew she'd won. I let her think it. One night, she said, "I'm thinking of listing the house soon. The market's perfect. We could make a fortune." "We?" I asked, steady. She waved her hand. "You know what I mean. It's the family's asset." I nodded. "Of course." Inside, I smiled. She had no idea that with every arrogant word, she was tightening the noose she'd built herself. The following week, Clark called. "It's time," she said simply. "They've met the conditions. You have evidence of ownership, payment, and fraudulent intent. I'm filing the property freeze order first thing Monday. Will they be notified?" I asked. "Yes," she said. "After it's filed. They'll find out when they try to access anything tied to the property." I exhaled, feeling a shiver of power run through me. "After that," she continued, "we proceed with civil filing for damages. But until the order is granted, do not react. Let them walk right into it." Understood. That weekend, I played the role of peacekeeper one last time. I showed up for dinner with a bottle of wine. My mother seemed relieved, my father cautious. Mara, smug as ever, took the wine and poured herself a glass. "I'm glad we can move past all that drama," my mother said. "It's better when family doesn't fight." "Absolutely," I said, smiling. My father nodded approvingly. "We knew you'd come around. You've always been sensible." Mara laughed. She had no choice. They all laughed then, light, careless, easy. It was almost cinematic, how perfect they looked in that moment, a family convinced of their own righteousness. I excused myself to the bathroom halfway through dinner. Inside, I opened my phone, found Clark's message, and read it again. Filing Monday 9 a.m. After that, silence ends. I looked at myself in the mirror. My reflection was calm, detached, but my eyes were alive with something sharp and certain. When I returned to the table, Mara was showing my parents' real estate listings on her tablet. "I think this one's perfect," she said. "If I sell now, I can buy something even bigger." My mother clapped her hands. "You deserve it, sweetheart." I sat down quietly, folding my hands in my lap, and said, "Yes, Mara. You really do." They didn't notice the irony dripping from every syllable. By the time dessert came, I'd memorized the scene, the smell of lemon pie, the laughter, the flicker of the chandelier. Because next time I saw this dining room, it would look very different. After dinner, as I walked out, my father called after me, "Drive safe, Elena. And remember, we're family. No matter what." I turned, smiled faintly, and said, "Of course, Dad. Always." When I got home, I forwarded the last batch of recordings to Clark and wrote only 3 words in the email subject line. "Ready when you are." Her reply came instantly. "Monday. Be near your phone." I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was nervous, but because I was alive in a way I hadn't been in years. The storm wasn't coming anymore, it was already here, and I was the one steering it. At 9:03 a.m. Monday morning, my phone buzzed. Clark's message was short, clinical, and beautiful. "Property freeze granted. They can't sell. They can't move. They can't touch it. When Clark's text came through, property freeze granted, I sat perfectly still. It didn't feel like victory yet, it felt like silence before an explosion. The order was official. Effective immediately, no sale, no transfer, no loan could touch the property without my written consent. It was the first time in years that the law finally leaned toward me. I opened the PDF sheet attached, the seal of the county court stamped across the top. My name, clear and defiant, plaintiff, Elena Vance. For a moment, I let myself breathe. Then the work began. Clark called that afternoon. Her voice was composed, but I could hear the undertone of satisfaction. They'll find out soon, Elena. Probably by tomorrow when the title office updates the registry. When they do, expect a call. Don't answer. Let me handle all communication from this point on. What happens next? I asked. Now we move from silence to evidence. Every transaction, every message, gather it. I want to reconstruct every cent you've spent on that house. That night, I became my own accountant, archivist, and detective. My kitchen table turned into a battlefield of receipts and bank statements. Paper everywhere, some coffee-stained, some creased from years of storage. I sorted them by year, by month, by heartbreak. Electric bills. Repair invoices. Mortgage deductions. Property taxes. Insurance renewals. Every piece of paper screamed the same truth: I was the one who built their comfort. I found an old email from my mother thanking me for covering again because Mara's money is tight this month. The date was 3 years ago. I highlighted it in neon yellow and whispered, "Got you." By midnight, the evidence folder on my laptop was 23 gigabytes. Clark would have been proud. I paused once, staring at an old photograph that had slipped out of a drawer. It was me and Mara at the housewarming party 6 years ago. We were smiling, arms around each other. My eyes were bright then, hopeful, stupidly trusting. Hers were already calculating. I put the photo face down. The next morning, I emailed everything to Clark. Her reply came within the hour. Received. Impeccable work. I'll have my paralegal compile a formal evidence binder. You just became your own best witness. It was surreal, how something so devastating could suddenly turn methodical, clinical, powerful. By noon, the ripples started. My phone lit up with unknown numbers. Then, finally, my mother's name appeared. I didn't answer. Then came a text. "Elena, what did you do? The bank froze our access. Mara can't make any changes. This is serious." My hands trembled, not with fear but with satisfaction. I typed a reply but deleted it before sending. Clark's voice echoed in my head, "Let them panic. Panic exposes truth." A few hours later, Mara called. Then again. Then a third time. Each time I ignored it, my pulse steadied. By the fourth missed call, a voicemail came through. "You've gone too far, Elena. This is harassment. I'll call the police if I have to. You don't understand what you're doing." I smiled bitterly. I understand perfectly. That evening, Clark called me again. "They've just hired representation," she said. I received a notice of counsel. Their lawyer's name is Henry Wallace. Predictable, arrogant type. He'll likely call me tomorrow. Should I be worried? I asked. Not unless you start apologizing. Her confidence steadied me. The next day, I worked remotely from my apartment. My phone stayed silent, but I could imagine the chaos unfolding inside that house. The kind of fear that builds when people who've lived on borrowed morality realize the bill has come due. At 3:47 p.m., Clark emailed me. Wallace contacted me. He claims the property belongs to his client, Mara Vance. I've sent him the original mortgage documents with your signature, along with the payment records. His tone changed immediately. They'll regroup. Stay quiet. I read her words twice, smiling. His tone changed immediately. It was happening. The facade was cracking. That night, I sat by my window with tea instead of wine. The city lights blurred, but this time they didn't feel mocking. For the first time, I wasn't the one reacting, I was the one creating consequences. I picked up my notebook and began writing, not a diary, but a ledger of accountability. Each entry began with a name, a date, a dollar amount. Mara, August 14, $2,300. Parents, February 9, $1,200. Every entry was a scar turned into a record. At the bottom of the page, I wrote the words Clark had said on our first call. They already destroyed you. What we're doing is reconstruction. By the time the clock struck midnight, I had rebuilt more than my case, I had rebuilt my resolve. They wanted silence. I gave them paperwork. They wanted loyalty. I gave them legal documentation. They wanted me erased. I made myself undeniable. Still, deep down, I knew this was only the beginning. Clark had warned me, when people like that lose control, they get desperate. Desperate people don't go quietly. At 2:12 a.m., my phone buzzed again. A text from an unknown number. You think you've won, Elena? You just declared war on your own blood. I didn't sleep after that message. The words, "You just declared war on your own blood," replayed in my head like an echo I couldn't silence. It wasn't just a threat, it was a confession. Only someone guilty would say that. By morning, I forwarded the message to Clark. She called within minutes. "Save it," she said. "Don't respond. That kind of intimidation will work in our favor. Harassment strengthens your position." I nodded even though she couldn't see me. My throat was dry. "You think it's Mara?" Clark's tone was calm, clinical. "Probably. Or your father. Either way, let them keep talking." So I listened. It was surreal, pretending to be the obedient daughter again while secretly documenting every venomous word they threw at me. My life had turned into a wiretap of betrayal. 2 days later, Mara texted me. "Family lunch Sunday. You should come. Let's talk like adults." Clark warned me, "Go. Record everything." So I went. Sunday lunch smelled like roast chicken and denial. The house looked the same, but something in the air had shifted, tight, uneasy. My mother opened the door, all fake warmth and trembling nerves. "Elena. I'm glad you came," she said, pulling me into a hug that felt like an apology wrapped in poison. My father was already at the table, newspaper folded, pretending calm. Mara sat across from him, wine glass in hand. "Sit," my mother said. "We're not enemies." I sat. The phone in my pocket was already recording. Mara smiled faintly. "You've really made a mess of things." I kept my voice light. "Just handling my responsibilities." "Responsibilities?" she scoffed. "You froze my house." I raised an eyebrow. "Your house?" Her jaw tightened. "Don't start that." My father slammed his hand on the table. "Enough. You're turning family matters into legal nonsense." "Legal nonsense?" I repeated softly. "You mean contracts? Mortgages? Ownership? That nonsense?" He glared at me. "We took care of you your whole life, Elena. You owe this family." "I owe you?" The words came out sharper than intended. "I paid for this roof. I carried your debts. I cleaned up every mess you made. What exactly do I owe?" For a second, no one spoke. My mother's fork clinked against her plate. Mara stared at me with that same cold confidence she'd inherited from him. Then she leaned forward, voice dripping venom. "You always thought you were better than us. That's why you'll always be alone." Her words should have hurt. Once, they would have shattered me. Now, they just sounded small. "I'd rather be alone," I said evenly, "than surrounded by people who mistake cruelty for love." She laughed, a brittle, humorless sound. You can't even see what you're doing. You're destroying your own family over a piece of property. I smiled faintly. You already destroyed it. I'm just collecting the evidence. The silence that followed was delicious. My father's voice broke it, low and dangerous. If you think you can take us to court and come out of it clean, you're mistaken. I tilted my head. Are you threatening me? He looked away. I'm warning you. Good, I said quietly. Warnings are easier to document. Mara's eyes flickered then, just a second of fear before she hit it with another sip of wine. I stayed for exactly 40 more minutes. I let them rant, justify, belittle, accuse. Every word captured on my phone. Every tone shift, every confession. By the time I left, my ears were ringing, but my heart was steady. That night, I sent the audio to Clark. She called immediately. Elena, she said, her voice clipped but thrilled, that's gold. You got them admitting to financial dependency and self-incrimination. This will tear their defense apart. Good, I whispered. Tear everything apart. Clark paused. You handled yourself perfectly. But be ready, they'll escalate. They're losing control. She was right. The next day, my phone buzzed nonstop. Mara called, texted, even emailed. My mother sent long messages filled with guilt and emotional blackmail, lines like family is forever and you're breaking your father's heart. I didn't reply. I was done speaking. Listening had become my new form of power. That week, Clark and her paralegal compiled a transcript of the lunch recording, over 28 pages long. Reading it was like watching my family dissect itself line by line. They weren't a family anymore. They were witnesses against themselves. Still, when I closed the document, something inside me ached. Even justice doesn't erase longing. Even power doesn't fill the void where love should have been. I stood by the window, watching the evening fade into night, and whispered, you taught me silence. Now you'll hear what it sounds like when it's used against you. The following Sunday, another text arrived. We're putting the house on the market this week. You can't stop us forever. I smiled at my reflection in the window, calm, almost amused. They still didn't know. The freeze order was already in the system. If they tried to list the property, the broker would hit a legal wall so fast it would feel like hitting glass. Let them run full speed into it. 2 days later, my phone rang again, Clark's number flashing across the screen. When I answered, her voice carried a quiet satisfaction. They just tried to list the house, Elena. It bounced. The freeze held. A pause. And now they're furious. I was at my desk when the call came in. The sound of Clark's voice was cool, deliberate, the voice of someone who has already predicted every move her opponents might make. They tried to list the house this morning, she said. The real estate agent submitted the paperwork and hit the freeze order immediately. The listing system locked them out. Your sister's name is flagged under unauthorized ownership. A slow smile spread across my face. What happened after that? They panicked. Wallace, her lawyer, called me, pretending to be calm, asking if we could clarify ownership concerns. I sent him your loan documents again and reminded him that filing a fraudulent title change carries criminal penalties. I leaned back in my chair, heart thudding like distant thunder. How did he take that? Clark laughed softly. He hung up. For a long time I didn't speak. I just sat there, absorbing the moment. The invisible weight I'd been carrying, years of silence, gaslighting, and obligation, felt a little lighter. Then my phone buzzed again. Mom. I stared at her name for several seconds before answering. Elena, she said immediately, voice trembling, what did you do? The agent called us, he said the property can't be touched. Do you have any idea how humiliating this is? I closed my eyes. Do you have any idea how humiliating it was to be locked out of my own house? This is different, she snapped. This is public. Everyone will find out. Good, I said quietly. Let them. There was silence on the line, then a ragged exhale. You're destroying your sister's life. I laughed, a sound that surprised both of us. She should have thought of that before she stole mine. My father's voice cut in, he must have grabbed the phone. Elena, end this madness. You're turning this into a circus. I stood, pacing. You turned it into a crime scene the day you lied to me. I'm just filing the report. Don't be dramatic, he barked. This is family. Family doesn't sue family. Then maybe you should have treated me like one, I said, and hung up. Minutes later, another call. This time from Mara. I debated letting it ring, but curiosity won. Congratulations, she said coldly. You've managed to humiliate all of us. I didn't need to manage much, I replied. You did that yourself. She laughed bitterly. You think this means you win? You can't freeze people out forever. Lawyers cost money, Elena. You'll bleed out before we do. I smiled into the receiver. Oh, you'd be surprised. My lawyer works on contingency. A pause. You're bluffing. Try me. Her voice hardened. You're pathetic. You could have had us as family. Instead, you'll have us as enemies. You were never family, I said softly. Just a bill I kept paying. She hung up. I stood there, staring at my reflection in the dark screen of my phone, and realized something startling. I wasn't angry anymore. The fury had burned out, leaving only clarity. That evening, I met Clark at her office. She had printed everything, the call transcripts, texts, evidence folders, all neatly stacked in 3 binders labeled Phase 2, Civil Action. Phase 2? I asked, sitting down. She nodded. We've proven ownership. Now we sue for damages. The amount you've paid, emotional distress, legal fees. Based on my estimates, we're looking at a 6-figure claim. My breath caught. 6 figures? Clark smiled. You financed their lives for years. It's time they finance your recovery. I stared at the binders. They're going to hate me. They already do, she said simply. So stop worrying about their feelings. Start protecting your future. I nodded slowly. What do you need from me? Nothing for now, she said. They'll get served next week. When it happens, you'll know. That night, I sat on my couch with the lights off, the city murmuring beyond the window. My phone kept lighting up with messages, missed calls, texts, voicemails, but I ignored them all. I opened one instead from Clark. Remember, silence is strategy. Let their noise work for you. I thought of all the times I had been silenced unwillingly, when they dismissed my pain, ignored my effort, stole my name. Now I was quiet by choice, and the difference was everything. I scrolled through the messages anyway. Mom, how could you do this? Dad, we need to talk before this gets worse. Mara, you're making a fool of yourself. I deleted every one. Then came a new message, from an unknown number. Court notice will be delivered to your address tomorrow morning. Prepare yourself. It wasn't signed, but I knew it was from Wallace. Clark had warned me, they'll try to scare you before they see the papers. I smiled grimly. I already am prepared, I whispered. The next morning, I brewed coffee and waited. At 10:14 a.m., the knock came. A courier in a suit handed me an envelope stamped with my name. Notice of legal action, defendants, Mara Vance, Harold and Linda Vance. I traced the embossed seal with my thumb. The paper felt heavier than any document I'd ever held. For a long time, I didn't open it. I just stared at my name above theirs. I wasn't under them anymore. I was above them, in ink, in law, in truth. When I finally unfolded it, my eyes caught on one sentence that made everything worth it. Plaintiff seeks restitution and declaratory judgment affirming full ownership. I read it twice. Then a third time. This was no longer just about property. It was about proof. Proof that I existed. That I mattered. That I was right. That evening, Clark called again. "They've been served," she said. "Your father yelled at the process server. Your sister cried. Your mother slammed the door." I exhaled slowly. Good. Now we wait for their lawyer's response. Expect an escalation, calls, letters, maybe even visits. Don't engage. Every word they say now is evidence. Got it, I said. Thank you. She hesitated for a second. Elena, one more thing. Yes? You're handling this with more restraint than most clients I've seen. Whatever happens next, remember, power isn't about revenge. It's about control. I smiled. Don't worry. I've been rehearsing control my whole life. As I hung up, headlights swept across my apartment window. A car idled outside, silver, familiar. I froze, heart racing, as I saw my father step out, slam the door, and start walking toward my building. The knock on my door wasn't gentle. It was deliberate, heavy enough to rattle the frame. For a moment, I thought about pretending I wasn't home, but that instinct belonged to the old me. The new me opened the door. My father stood there, shoulders squared, face flushed with anger. Behind him, the silver car idled at the curb like an accomplice. "Can I come in?" he asked. It wasn't a question. "No," I said. His jaw clenched. "Then we'll talk here." I crossed my arms, blocking the doorway. "Go ahead." He took a deep breath, trying for authority but landing on desperation. "You don't know what you've started. You've humiliated this family. Do you realize what people are saying?" "I don't care what they're saying," I said evenly. "For once, I care about what's true." He stepped closer, voice low and tight. "Truth doesn't matter when you drag your own blood into court. It didn't matter to you when you stole from me." His face twitched. "Watch your mouth." "Or what?" I asked quietly. "You'll disown me again?" He looked at me then, not with love, not even with disappointment, but with the raw disbelief of a man realizing he'd lost control. "This isn't who you are, Elena," he said. "You were the good one. The quiet one." "I still am," I said. "Just not your version." Behind him, the wind picked up. He ran a hand through his graying hair and sighed. "Your mother's sick over this." "She was fine when she lied to me," I said. "Spare me the guilt trip." He shifted tactics, softening his voice. "You think this will make you happy? Owning a house doesn't fix loneliness." That hit deeper than I wanted it to. For a split second, I almost faltered. Then Clark's words came back, "They'll mix love with manipulation. Don't drink it." "You're right," I said. "It won't make me happy. But it'll make me free." His eyes darkened. "Mara's filing a counterclaim. She says she contributed emotionally, helped keep the home running. Courts take that into account." I smiled faintly. "Then let's see what the judge says about her emotional payments. Maybe they accept gossip as currency now." That cracked his composure. "You're being cruel." "No," I said. "I'm being equal." He exhaled sharply, defeated. "You'll regret this." "Maybe," I said. "But at least it'll be my regret, not yours." He stared at me for a moment longer, then turned and walked back toward the car. The engine roared, and within seconds, he was gone. I closed the door slowly, locking it twice. My hands were shaking, but not from fear, from adrenaline. The sound of my heartbeat filled the apartment. The next morning, the official court notice arrived. A thick envelope sealed with the Superior Court's insignia. Inside, the hearing date was set, May 17th, 9 a.m. I stood by the window, letter in hand, and whispered to myself, "That's the day everything changes." I forwarded the notice to Clark. Within minutes, she called. "It's happening," she said. "This will be our first appearance. They'll try to posture, maybe intimidate, but we have facts. They have feelings. Facts win. What do I need to do?" "Stay quiet. Let me speak in court. The less emotion you show, the more control we keep." Her confidence steadied me. "Got it. Also," she added, "expect media. Family property disputes sometimes make local news when they involve fraud. Don't comment if anyone reaches out." I almost laughed. My family's about to be a headline. Clark's tone softened. "Let them have their spectacle. You'll have your justice." That evening, the call started again. Mara, my mother, even relatives I hadn't spoken to in years, all begging, accusing, shaming. "You're tearing us apart. Be reasonable. What will people think?" I didn't answer any of them. Instead, I printed every voicemail transcript and added them to the folder labeled Emotional Harassment, Exhibit D. The transformation was complete. Every word they spoke became evidence, not pain. By Thursday, Clark had prepared everything for the hearing. She met me at a cafe near the courthouse to review the case file. When she arrived, she handed me a slim folder. "This is what we'll submit. Ownership proof, payment trail, recordings, witness statement from the bank representative." I flipped through it. Each page was a piece of my history, finally organized, finally real. Clark watched me silently before saying, "You ready for them to see the truth in public?" I met her eyes. "I've waited my whole life for that." She smiled. "Good. Then we're ready." That night, I drove past the house one last time before the hearing. The lights were on. Through the window, I saw them, my parents, Mara, her husband, talking, arguing, gesturing wildly. For years, I would have looked at that scene and felt left out. But now, I felt free from it. The walls that once held my silence were about to echo my truth. I parked for a moment, rolled down the window, and whispered, "Enjoy the calm. It ends in court." When I got home, Clark texted one last reminder. "Wear dark, solid colors. No visible anger. Remember, we're not fighting, we're proving." I stared at the message, the irony of it all striking me. For so long, I'd been taught to stay quiet to keep peace. Now, I was staying calm to keep power. The difference was everything. I laid out my clothes for the hearing: black blazer, white blouse, small silver necklace. The outfit looked simple, but to me, it felt like armor. Then, before bed, I took the court notice and pinned it to my refrigerator. Not as a reminder of conflict, but as a monument. The day I stopped being their scapegoat. The day I became my own witness. The morning of the hearing arrived with a text from Clark. "They've arrived early. Cameras are here. Get ready, Elena. Today the world hears your side." The courthouse smelled like old wood, paper, and fear. I'd never been inside one before, not as a plaintiff, not as anyone. But that morning, walking through the glass doors with Clark beside me, I felt a strange calm. Like all the chaos behind me had condensed into purpose. "Keep your shoulders back," she murmured. "You're not entering a battlefield, you're walking into a record." The hallway hummed with whispers and the scuff of shoes. My parents stood near the courtroom entrance, Mara between them like a queen who'd lost her crown but didn't know it yet. Her eyes found mine, and for the first time in my life, she looked uncertain. Clark nodded to them politely, the way a predator acknowledges prey. "Remember," she said under her breath, no reaction. Inside, the courtroom was smaller than I'd imagined. Pale light spilled through high windows, a faint echo lingered after every footstep. We sat at our table, Clark, her paralegal, and me, facing the raised bench where the judge would soon sit. Across from us, Wallace shuffled papers with the nervous precision of a man trying to hide sweat. Mara's husband leaned toward her, whispering. My parents stared at the table in front of them, avoiding my eyes. Then the bailiff called out, "All rise." The judge entered, gray hair, steel gaze. Case number 5378. Vance vs. Vance et al. Property and financial dispute. Hearing my last name split like that, against itself, hit harder than I expected. We sat. Clark stood smoothly. Your Honor, my client, Ms. Elena Vance, seeks declaratory judgment affirming sole ownership of the Birchwood property and compensation for fraudulent transfer attempts made without lender authorization. Her voice was crisp, controlled, lethal in its precision. Wallace stood next, clearing his throat. Your Honor, my clients acted in good faith. There was no malicious intent, merely a family misunderstanding. The judge raised an eyebrow. A misunderstanding that resulted in a false deed transfer? Wallace hesitated. There was confusion. Clark didn't flinch. I'd like to enter Exhibit A, the original mortgage documents, signed solely by my client. She handed the file to the clerk. Every paper slid across the bench like a blade. The judge scanned the pages. Ms. Vance, your signature appears alone. Yes, Your Honor, Clark said. Her parents and sister never co-signed, never contributed financially, yet attempted to transfer ownership last year. We also have bank records showing consistent payments from Ms. Vance's personal account for 6 years. The courtroom was silent except for the shuffle of documents. My heart pounded so loudly I could hear it in my ears. Wallace tried to recover. Your Honor, families often pool resources informally. My client, Ms. Mara Vance, provided emotional and domestic contributions that. Clark cut in sharply. Emotional contributions do not override legal ownership. Even the judge's mouth twitched slightly, almost a smirk. I'm inclined to agree. Mara shifted in her seat, color draining from her face. Then Clark presented Exhibit B, the recordings. Your Honor, these are verified transcripts of conversations between Ms. Vance and the defendants, confirming their intent to transfer and sell the property without her consent. Wallace leapt up. Objection, illegally obtained. Clark didn't miss a beat. Your Honor, these were voice memos made by my client during conversations in which she was a participant. Perfectly admissible. The judge nodded. Objection overruled. Proceed. The clerk pressed play. The room filled with my family's voices, their laughter, their arrogance, their words turning into weapons against them. Mara's voice rang out clearly. You were helping. You never said you wanted ownership. My father's voice followed. You should be grateful we even included you this long. And finally my mother's. It's her time now. Mara deserves it. Each line landed like a strike. I didn't look at them. I stared straight ahead, jaw tight, every muscle holding the weight of years of silence. When the recordings ended, the courtroom was still. You could hear the hum of the air conditioner. The judge exhaled slowly. I've heard enough for now. Ms. Clark, you may proceed with damages. Clark nodded and handed over another folder. Your Honor, we are seeking reimbursement for 6 years of mortgage payments, property taxes, and emotional damages, totaling $123,000. Wallace sputtered. That's outrageous. Clark didn't even look at him. Outrageous is stealing from your own daughter. The judge rapped the gavel lightly. Mr. Wallace, enough. He sank back into his chair. Clark rested a steady hand on my shoulder. It grounded me. I wanted to cry, to shake, to laugh, but I stayed still. For once, my restraint wasn't submission, it was power. After reviewing the documents, the judge looked up. We'll take a short recess. I'll deliver my preliminary judgment this afternoon. The bailiff called, all rise. We stood. Mara turned toward me, eyes wet, lips trembling. You can still stop this, she whispered. We're family. I met her gaze. So act like it, I said quietly, and walked past her. Outside, reporters had gathered. Someone shouted, Elena, is it true your parents gave your sister the property? I didn't answer. Clark had told me not to. But I looked directly into the nearest camera and said, softly but clearly, the truth always finds its paperwork. We sat on a bench outside while Clark typed notes on her tablet. They're cornered, she said. Whatever happens this afternoon, they can't undo the damage. I nodded slowly. I just want it over. She looked up. Almost. You did perfectly, Elena. I exhaled. For the first time since this began, I believed her. At 2:43 p.m., Clark's phone buzzed. She looked at the screen, then at me. The judge just issued the ruling, she said. I held my breath as she read. Full ownership to you. Restitution pending. They're finished. The judge's ruling landed like thunder. Even before Clark finished reading it aloud, I knew it was over. The courtroom was silent, except for the sound of my own heartbeat filling my ears. Full ownership confirmed, Clark repeated, voice steady but sharp. Restitution hearing to follow. Mara's mouth fell open. My mother gasped softly, one trembling hand covering her lips. My father went pale, as if someone had stripped the air from the room. The judge's gavel came down once, firm and final. Court is adjourned. The sound echoed through my chest. Years of invisibility ended in that single knock of wood. I stood slowly. My legs felt weightless. Clark gathered the files, her movements calm, professional. Congratulations, she murmured. You just became untouchable. But across the room, chaos began. My father was already arguing with Wallace. This is absurd. We'll appeal, she manipulated everything. The judge had already left, but his voice carried anyway. Mara turned to me, eyes bright with panic. You can't do this. You can't actually take the house. I met her gaze. I already did. Her lips trembled. It's not fair. I'll have nowhere to go. You should have thought of that before you stole it. My mother took a step forward, tears streaming down her cheeks. Elena, please. Don't do this to us. We're family. I almost laughed. You did this to yourselves. The bailiff approached, warning them to calm down, but my father shoved past him. You'll regret this, Elena, he shouted. No one wins by destroying their own blood. I turned back one last time. No one wins by pretending love excuses theft. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed us like a storm. Cameras flashed, microphones thrust toward my face. Ms. Vance, how does it feel to win against your own family? Do you plan to evict them? Was this revenge? Clark stepped between us, her hand steady on my arm. No comments today, she said firmly, guiding me through the crowd. But one question pierced the noise. What do you want from them now? I stopped walking. Clark glanced at me, uncertain. I turned to the nearest camera and said, an apology, and my piece. The flashes went off faster, voices overlapping, but I was already walking away. By the time I got home, my phone was a battlefield. Voicemails, texts, even emails from strangers. Some praising me for standing up to injustice, others calling me heartless. I didn't read them. I sat on the floor of my apartment and let the quiet settle. The court's judgment sat beside me, printed, stamped, sealed. Plaintiff, Elena Vance. Judgment in favor. Those words felt like oxygen. I thought I'd cry, but I didn't. The victory didn't feel like fireworks, it felt like gravity returning after years of floating through someone else's lies. Still, part of me ached. The small, stubborn part that still wanted a mother's hug, a father's pride, a sister's laugh unpoisoned by envy. But those belonged to another lifetime. I had learned that love without respect was just control. And control was something I would never surrender again. 3 days later, the sheriff's office delivered official eviction notices to the Birchwood address. Clark handled the logistics, I didn't need to be there. But I went anyway. When I arrived, the front yard was a mess, wilted flowers, uncollected mail, a broken wind chime knocking weakly against the doorframe. Mara was standing outside, pale, her suitcase by her feet. My mother sat on the porch steps, face in her hands. My father stood near the driveway, silent and shaking with quiet rage. The deputy handed them the final paperwork. "You have 72 hours to vacate," he said. Mara turned to me, her voice cracking. "Elena, please. Don't do this. You don't understand how hard things have been." I met her eyes. "You're right. I don't understand theft disguised as family." My mother whispered, "You're cruel." I almost believed her, until I remembered all the nights I'd spent paying for their comfort while they pretended I didn't exist. I stepped closer. "No. I'm just done being kind to cruelty." They said nothing after that. Only the sound of the wind filled the silence. I turned, walked back to my car, and didn't look back. That night, Clark called. "They're vacating. The locks will be changed in 48 hours. Once the restitution process starts, we'll garnish their accounts for repayment." I was quiet for a long moment. "Will they have anything left?" "Not much," she said softly. "But you will." I didn't answer right away. "It doesn't feel like winning," I admitted. "It's not supposed to," she replied. "It's supposed to feel like balance." Later that evening, I poured myself a glass of wine and walked to the window. The city lights flickered below, tiny, indifferent. I thought of the little girl I used to be, the one who stood by the sink washing dishes while her sister got her hair brushed. That girl never thought she'd see this day. She just wanted to be seen, to be chosen, to matter. Now she had proof that she always did. I lifted the glass toward the night sky. To her, I whispered. To the girl who paid every bill and was still told she was lucky to help. To the woman who finally learned that silence can be louder than begging. To the truth, ugly and clear, written in black ink with her name on top. The next morning, Clark called again. Her tone was careful, measured. "Elena, they've filed for a stay of eviction. They're claiming medical hardship. It'll delay the process, but not for long." A pause. "Do you want to be there when the final order is enforced?" I hadn't planned on going back, but curiosity has a cruel voice. It whispers, "See what they look like now." So yes, I went. Not out of compassion, not even out of closure, but because I wanted to witness what happens when the curtain finally falls on a family built on deceit. The driveway was cluttered with boxes. The air smelled like rain and dust. My old car still had the faint oil stains on the pavement where I used to park. The familiarity hurt more than I expected. When I stepped out, my mother was standing by the porch, arms crossed, eyes red. "You shouldn't be here," she said quietly. "Neither should you," I replied. "The order's final." Her chin trembled. "You've broken this family, Elena. You've turned your sister into a wreck." I looked past her toward the window. Through the curtains, I saw Mara pacing with her phone pressed to her ear, gesturing wildly. "She turned herself into one," I said. "You think this makes you powerful?" my mother snapped. "You'll be alone. That house will echo with it." I smiled faintly. "Echoes are quieter than your voices ever were." She flinched, like she hadn't expected cruelty to speak so softly. Then my father came outside, looking older, heavier. The arrogance he once wore like armor had rusted into bitterness. "If you have any decency left," he said, "you'll withdraw this before it's too late. We can fix this." "Too late was 6 years ago," I said. He stepped closer. "Do you want us homeless?" I met his gaze evenly. I didn't want to be invisible, but here we are. He glared at me, breathing hard, then turned away, muttering, "Ungrateful." That word again, the one they always used when I stopped obeying. Inside the house, voices rose. Mara had hung up and was crying, not the kind of tears that ask for forgiveness, but the kind that beg for loopholes. I stood in the doorway and watched her crumble. "Why are you doing this?" she said through tears. "You won. Isn't that enough?" I stared at her. You didn't think about enough when you forged my name. I didn't forge anything, she shouted. I just fixed what should have been mine. I let her words hang there. The echo of them filled the room like smoke. Should have been yours? I repeated. Because Mom said you deserved it? Mara's mouth quivered. I'm the one who stayed. I took care of them. I laughed bitterly. With my money. Her face contorted, desperate now. Elena, please, don't throw us out. We have nowhere to go. I looked around the house, the walls I'd painted, the shelves I'd installed, the space I had once called home. It didn't feel like mine yet, not fully, but it wasn't theirs anymore either. I'm not throwing you out, I said finally. The law is. She froze, disbelief etched across her face. You think hiding behind paperwork makes you right? No, I said quietly. It makes me free. Behind me, the sheriff's deputy cleared his throat. Ms. Vance, we'll begin the process shortly. Mara turned to him, voice shrill. She's my sister. You can't just let her. The deputy's expression didn't waver. Ma'am, it's a court order. My mother broke then. Her sobs filled the hallway, echoing off the walls like ghosts of old dinners and forgotten birthdays. My father stood stiffly, eyes glassy, jaw tight. Do you hate us that much? He asked. No, I said. If I hated you, I'd have done this years ago. He didn't respond. None of them did. They just watched as the deputy began the slow, methodical process of eviction, inventory lists, documentation, timelines. Each signature was another nail sealing the past shut. At one point, Mara sat on the stairs, head in her hands, whispering, I didn't think it would end like this. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. But pity is a luxury you lose when you've been robbed by love. Later, as the sun started to fade, I walked outside. The yard was littered with remnants of their life, old photo frames, broken furniture, boxes labeled Mara's things. I knelt beside one and saw something that stopped me, a photo of us as kids, maybe 8 and 5, arms around each other, smiling. For a heartbeat, I saw not the woman who lied, but the sister who used to sleep beside me during storms. I placed the photo back gently. Some memories don't belong in court, they belong buried. My mother came outside again, face blotchy from crying. You'll regret this when you're old, she said. I didn't answer. Regret requires attachment. All I had left was distance. She studied me for a long time, then whispered, You got what you wanted. I hope it's worth it. I met her eyes. It is. Because for once, it's mine. She turned away without another word. When the deputy signaled that they were finished, I nodded. Change the locks first thing in the morning. He nodded. Understood. As I walked back to my car, the sky broke open with rain. It soaked through my coat, cold and cleansing. I didn't run for cover. I let it wash over me like absolution. Through the windshield, I could still see them, Mara kneeling in the doorway, my mother clinging to her, my father standing motionless behind them. For years, I'd dreamed of this moment. Now that it had come, it didn't feel like revenge. It felt like release. I started the engine, headlights cutting through the downpour. The wipers moved rhythmically, like a heartbeat steadier than mine. They wanted to make me feel guilty. But guilt can't survive where truth finally lives. As I drove away, I whispered to the storm, It's over. But the rain answered differently, tapping on the roof like a reminder, nothing's ever truly over. The next morning, Clark called early. Her voice was calm, but serious. Elena, they filed an emergency motion, your sister's claiming emotional duress and demanding temporary stay. It's weak, but the judge granted a 24-hour delay. A pause. They're not leaving quietly. The next day, the house looked different, less like a home, more like a battlefield after the war had already been decided. Boxes half-packed, curtains missing, furniture pushed against walls as if bracing for an inevitable storm. When I arrived, Mara was sitting on the porch steps, clutching a mug she didn't drink from. The rain from the night before had left puddles on the driveway, the air smelled of damp wood and defeat. She looked up at me, eyes swollen. "I knew you'd come." "I didn't," I said. "Clark told me about the motion. I came to make sure you're following it." Her laugh was soft, bitter. "Of course. Always checking, always managing, always perfect Elena, the family accountant, the emotional custodian, the judge." "I came because I don't trust you," I said plainly. "And history proves I'm right." She looked away, then back at me. "You think I'm proud of this? Of how it ended? I never wanted a war." I folded my arms. "You wanted ownership. That's worse." Mara exhaled, shaky. "Maybe I just wanted proof that I mattered. That mom and dad loved me more because I had something to show for it." "That's the difference between us," I said. "I used to want love to mean proof. Now I just want peace." She stood, brushing the damp off her jeans. "You can still have both. You can still fix this." I frowned. "What are you talking about?" She walked to the doorway and gestured for me to follow. Inside, the living room was stripped, empty shelves, half-rolled rugs, boxes marked with names. On the coffee table sat an envelope, thick and white. "What's that?" "An offer," she said quietly. "Everything we can pull together, $50,000. Cash and assets. If you withdraw the case, we'll walk away, no questions asked." I almost laughed. "You think this is about money?" Her voice trembled. "It's all we have left." I stared at the envelope. For a moment, I imagined how easy it would be: take it, sign a withdrawal, disappear. End the noise. End the legal filings. End them. But then I saw the old version of myself in that picture, the woman who said yes to every unfair request, who cleaned up their chaos just to avoid being called cruel. "No," I said. Her shoulders sagged. "Please, Elena. Dad's health isn't good. Mom hasn't slept. We can't start over." I met her gaze. "You didn't think about starting over when you changed that title." She flinched. "I thought I was fixing things." "You were fixing your ego." Her tears came suddenly, like a storm breaking loose. "I just wanted something that was mine," she whispered. "And you took what was mine to get it," I said. We stood in silence for a long time, surrounded by boxes and ghosts. Then she said, quietly, "I miss you." The words hit harder than I expected. For a second, I saw flashes of us as children, running through sprinklers, whispering secrets under the blanket, promising we'd never turn out like our parents. But promises, like families, break quietly long before they shatter. "I miss who we were," I said finally. "But that person died the moment you decided I didn't deserve to be seen." She looked at me then, really looked, as if seeing the years she'd ignored. "You've changed," she whispered. I nodded. "I had to." Her voice cracked. "If I walk away, do you ever forgive me?" "Forgiveness isn't the same as forgetting," I said. "And I don't owe you either." She sank back onto the couch, defeated. "Then I guess this is it." I turned to leave but hesitated at the door. "Mara," I said without facing her, "you always wanted the house. But you never understood, owning something isn't the same as belonging." When I stepped outside, the air was heavy with the scent of wet earth. Clark was waiting in her car across the street, just like she promised. I slid into the passenger seat. "She tried to bribe me," I said. Clark arched an eyebrow. "Did you take it?" "No." "Good. That money will become Exhibit F, attempted inducement to withdraw a legal claim." I blinked. "You mean it helps me?" Clark's lips curved faintly. "Desperation always helps the truth." I stared out the window at the house, its walls still standing, but everything inside hollowed out. "It doesn't feel like winning." Clark followed my gaze. "Winning isn't always loud, Elena. Sometimes it's just quiet enough to hear yourself think again. I nodded slowly. Then maybe I'm finally winning. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying Mara's words, I just wanted something that was mine. The cruel irony was that I'd wanted the same thing all along. I got up around midnight and sat by the window. The neighborhood was silent except for the faint rustle of wind through the trees. Somewhere out there, my family was packing their last bags, their illusions collapsing into cardboard boxes. I wanted to feel joy, but all I felt was exhaustion. Closure was supposed to feel lighter, but it just made space for grief. The house had never been a home, it had been a mirror. And now that the mirror was cracking, I could finally see myself clearly. The next morning, Clark called. Her tone was brisk, clipped. The judge denied the stay. They have until tomorrow at noon to vacate completely. Do you want to be present when the locks are changed? Her pause lingered. It's your choice, Elena, watch it end, or let it end without you. The next morning, the sky was gray, the kind of gray that presses on your lungs, heavy, waiting. I didn't need to be there. Clark had already said it was handled, that the sheriff would supervise, that everything was legal and final. But I went anyway. There are moments you have to see with your own eyes, if only to convince yourself they're real. When I arrived, the deputy's car was already parked at the curb. A locksmith stood beside him, toolbox open, waiting for the order. The house looked smaller now, somehow, stripped of its pretense and pride. Mara was sitting on the porch steps again, her face blank from exhaustion. My father stood near the car, smoking even though he'd quit years ago. My mother wasn't in sight, probably inside, pretending none of this was happening. The deputy turned to me. Ms. Vance? You're here to observe? I nodded. Yes. He tipped his hat politely. We'll proceed once they've cleared the last of their belongings. Mara looked up at me, her voice barely above a whisper. You won. I shook my head. No one wins in this kind of story. She swallowed hard. Then why does it feel like I'm the only one losing? I didn't answer. Because deep down, I knew she wasn't wrong. Her loss was loud and visible, mine had been silent, spread over years of being unseen. I'd already lived my defeat, she was just catching up. The locksmith crouched by the door, tools clicking softly. My father approached, jaw tight, voice shaking with restrained fury. Do you feel powerful now? I met his eyes. I feel honest. He sneered. You could have ended this quietly. We could have settled privately. But you had to make a scene. Dad, I said quietly, you made the scene when you signed your name to lies. He exhaled smoke, looking older than I'd ever seen him. You've always been dramatic. No, I said, I was always desperate. There's a difference. He turned away, muttering something I didn't catch. Inside the house, I heard my mother's voice, a sharp sound, pleading, breaking. She came out moments later, clutching a small framed photo of the four of us. This is all I'm taking, she said. I nodded. It's yours. She studied me for a moment, eyes wet and red. Do you even feel anything? Everything, I said softly. That's why I can't stop. She shook her head, whispering, we raised a stranger. You raised a survivor. Her lips trembled, and for a second, I saw something flicker, maybe regret, maybe just exhaustion. She turned away before it could settle. The locksmith stood and nodded to the deputy. Done. The new lock clicked softly into place. That sound, so small, so final, echoed louder than any verdict. The deputy turned to me. All set, Ms. Vance. Property secured. Thank you, I said. Mara stood abruptly, her face streaked with tears. You'll never sleep easy here, she spat. Every room will remind you of what you did. I met her gaze evenly. Good. I want to remember. Forgetting is how I ended up here in the first place. She stared at me, shaking, then turned and stormed down the driveway. My father followed, silent now. My mother lingered last, looking back once before getting into the car. The door slammed. The engine started. And just like that, they were gone. I stood in the driveway long after the sound of their car faded. The air felt different. Lighter, but not empty, more like something waiting to begin. The deputy gave me a nod. All yours now, Ms. Vance. I looked at the house, at the windows that once held their laughter and lies. Yeah, I said. All mine. He tipped his hat and drove off. The locksmith followed. Within minutes, it was just me and the house, the silent witness to every version of me that had ever lived here. I walked inside slowly, each step echoing against the bare walls. Dust hung in the air, glimmering in the gray light. Every room was stripped, no furniture, no photos, just the faint outlines where things used to be. In the living room, I ran my fingers over the wall where my childhood height marks were still faintly visible in pencil. Next to mine was Mara's, taller, neater, with perfect written above it in my father's handwriting. I traced the word once, then pressed my palm flat against it until the graphite smudged. Perfection was never the goal anymore. Ownership was. I walked through every room, whispering to the ghosts that lingered. You can rest now. When I reached the master bedroom, sunlight broke through the window. It hit the floor in a single bright strip, cutting across the empty space like an invitation. I stood in it for a while, letting the warmth touch my face. For the first time, it didn't feel like I was trespassing. The silence wasn't heavy anymore, it was mine. That night, I brought a single suitcase and a blanket. I didn't unpack. I just sat in the middle of the empty living room, the house humming softly with the memory of rain and the smell of clean wood. It didn't feel like revenge. It felt like truth reclaiming its place. I thought of Clark, her voice steady and relentless, reconstruction, not retaliation. She was right. I hadn't won a war, I'd rebuilt the ruins. I lay back on the floor and stared at the ceiling, breathing in the quiet. For the first time in years, my heartbeat didn't feel like an apology. Just before I fell asleep, my phone buzzed with a new message from Clark. Congratulations, Elena. It's officially yours. But brace yourself, the restitution phase begins next week. They're about to realize what owing you really means. When Clark's message came through, I sat up in the middle of the empty living room. The house creaked softly around me, like it was breathing again after years of being suffocated by lies. The words on the screen glowed faintly in the half-dark. Restitution hearing confirmed for Friday 10 a.m. They'll have to declare assets. Brace yourself. Declare assets. I smiled bitterly. That meant they'd have to show the truth on paper, the same truth they'd spent their entire lives avoiding. I made tea instead of coffee that morning. It felt like a ritual, a cleansing. The sound of the kettle filled the silence that had replaced all the shouting, the guilt, the noise. I drank slowly, letting the calm settle before the next storm. By Friday morning, the courthouse was quieter than the first time I'd been there. No reporters this time, no cameras, just the echo of footsteps in marble halls and the faint click of heels that belonged to people who didn't know my story. Clark met me in the hallway, file in hand, calm as always. They'll resist. It's reflexive. But the math won't lie. What happens if they can't pay? I asked. Then the court enforces garnishment, bank accounts, future income, assets. It's not about crushing them, Elena. It's about balance. Balance. That word used to mean keeping peace. Now it meant consequence. When we entered, my parents were already seated. My mother's face looked hollow, my father's hands trembled slightly as he fumbled with his papers. Mara sat beside them, wearing sunglasses indoors like a shield against shame. The judge entered, same one as before. He glanced at the file, then at me, then at them. Let's begin. Clark rose first. Your Honor, we are here to determine the restitution owed to Ms. Vance for 6 years of payments made under false pretense of shared family responsibility. The evidence has been reviewed and verified. The judge nodded. And the defense? Wallace, still their attorney, though he looked less confident now, stood and adjusted his glasses. Your Honor, my clients are willing to offer a settlement in good faith. I stiffened. Clark didn't. Let's hear it, she said. He cleared his throat. $25,000. Lump sum. Clark almost laughed. 6 years of mortgage payments, taxes, and maintenance costs total over $123,000. 25 is an insult, not a settlement. Wallace hesitated. It's all they can manage. The judge's tone cut through the room. I'll be the judge of that. Let's see the asset disclosures. He motioned to the clerk, who collected folders from both sides. Pages shuffled. The room held its breath. The judge flipped through the first file, eyebrows rising. Mr. and Mrs. Vance, according to these statements, you recently liquidated a joint savings account for $48,000. Where is that money? My father shifted in his seat. We used it to pay expenses. Define expenses. He hesitated. Legal fees. Home repairs. Some medical bills. Clark leaned in. Your Honor, those withdrawals occurred after the property was frozen. The home repairs could not have legally taken place. The judge turned another page, expression hardening. Ms. Mara Vance, your bank statements show a transfer of $15,000 to an unknown account. Care to explain? Mara's voice trembled. It was for my husband. He lost his job. Clark's tone was surgical. The timing matches the week after the first hearing, when restitution became likely. The judge sighed. I've seen enough creative accounting to last a lifetime. The court orders immediate payment of $60,000 within 30 days, remainder to follow via wage garnishment. Mara gasped. My mother's hand flew to her chest. My father muttered something under his breath that sounded like a curse. Clark didn't move, didn't gloat. She just wrote a note in her pad. Thank you, Your Honor. The gavel struck once, final, clean. Outside, the sunlight was sharp and merciless. The courthouse steps gleamed with it. My parents followed me out, moving slowly as if the air had thickened. My mother called after me, voice hoarse. Elena. Please, wait. I stopped. Not out of kindness, out of curiosity. She reached for me, but I stepped back. Don't, I said quietly. Her eyes filled. We'll pay. Somehow. Just, please, don't make this uglier than it has to be. It was already ugly, I said. You just dressed it in family dinners and called it love. She wiped her eyes. You sound like a stranger. I tilted my head. That's because you never listened when I sounded like your daughter. Mara stood behind her, arms crossed, lips trembling. I hope you're happy, she spat. You destroyed everything. I looked at her, really looked, and said, no, Mara. I rebuilt what you tried to destroy. She turned away, muttering something I couldn't hear. Clark joined me then, her calm presence a quiet anchor. You handled that perfectly. It doesn't feel perfect, I said. It's not supposed to, she replied. Justice never feels like revenge. It just stops the bleeding. We walked toward the parking lot in silence. The sound of our heels echoed like punctuation at the end of a long, brutal sentence. That night, I sat on the living room floor again, court documents spread before me. For the first time, I read them without shaking hands. Every number, every line item, every seal was proof that I had survived not by luck, but by law. My phone buzzed, another unknown number. I didn't answer. Then it buzzed again. A voicemail. I pressed play. My father's voice came through, rough and weary. Elena, we'll pay what we owe. Just remember we're still your family. We'll always be. I deleted it. Family had become a word that sounded like debt. I went to the window and looked out at the dark street, the rain starting again in soft drizzles. In the reflection, I saw my own face, not the frightened woman who begged for permission to exist, but the one who'd written her own ending. Clark's final text came just before midnight. Funds will transfer through the court. I suggest you take a vacation once it's cleared. I typed back. Maybe I'll go somewhere without last names. Then I set the phone down and whispered to the empty house. Balance due, paid in full. The next morning, a letter arrived, handwritten, no return address. Inside was a single line in Mara's handwriting. If the house is yours now, I hope it keeps you warm when everyone else is gone. The letter sat on my kitchen counter for hours before I opened it again. The ink bled slightly where her pen must have pressed too hard. If the house is yours now, I hope it keeps you warm when everyone else is gone. There was no signature, no apology, just that single line, sharp as glass. I read it 3 times. The first time, it stung. The second, I felt nothing. The third time, I laughed, soft, almost pitying. Mara had always believed warmth came from possession, not peace. That was her tragedy, not mine. I folded the note neatly, slipped it into a drawer, and poured myself a cup of tea. The house was silent, filled with the faint hum of the refrigerator and the occasional sigh of the floorboards. For the first time in years, the quiet didn't feel like punishment. It felt like truth settling in. The next few days were still. I cleaned the rooms, aired out the windows, peeled off the yellowing wallpaper that smelled faintly of perfume and resentment. Every scrape of old paper felt like erasing a memory, my mother's voice behind a closed door, my father's disapproval hanging in the air, Mara's laughter echoing in rooms I paid for. In the evenings, I'd sit on the porch with a blanket, watching the sun melt behind the trees. The house looked softer now, less haunted. It no longer whispered what they thought of me, it listened to what I thought of myself. On the 5th day, Clark called. Funds cleared, she said. The restitution is official. They've made the first payment through the court escrow. Already? Fear is a fast motivator. I smiled faintly. What happens now? You live, she said simply. You rebuild. The law's done its part. Her tone was final, but gentle, the way a doctor sounds after a successful surgery. You survived, but the scars are permanent. Thank you, I said quietly. You did this, she replied. I just translated your pain into paperwork. After we hung up, I sat there for a long time, looking at the sunlight crawling across the hardwood floors. It felt foreign, almost intrusive. Then I realized, it wasn't intruding. It was reclaiming space, same as me. The next morning, I woke to the sound of the doorbell. My heart jumped. For a second, I thought maybe Clark had come by, or maybe the deputy returning final papers. But when I opened the door, it wasn't any of them. It was Mara. She looked small. No makeup, hair tied back, dark circles under her eyes. She held a small cardboard box. Relax, she said softly. I'm not here to fight. I said nothing, just stepped aside. She walked in slowly, glancing around like she was walking through a memory. It looks different, she murmured. Cleaner. Quieter. It's mine now, I said. She nodded. I know. We stood in silence for a moment. Then she held out the box. These are yours. Old things, letters, photos, receipts. I found them when we were packing. I took the box carefully. Why bring them? She hesitated. Because, not everything you gave us was money. There it was, an almost apology, clumsy and incomplete. I set the box on the table. Thank you. Mara sighed, her eyes glistening. Mom's not talking to anyone. Dad's trying to sell his car to make payments. You really did it. I didn't do anything, I said quietly. The truth did. She looked at me like she didn't understand. Maybe she never would. After a moment, she asked, Do you hate me? I thought about it. The question didn't make me angry. It made me tired. No, I said. I don't hate you, Mara. I just stopped needing you to love me. Her face crumpled slightly. You used to protect me. I used to believe you needed protecting. She let out a long breath, glancing around one last time. You won't forgive me, will you? I already did, I said softly. That's why I can look at you right now. She blinked, surprised. You did? Yes. But forgiveness doesn't mean you get to come back. She nodded slowly, biting her lip. Fair. When she turned to leave, she stopped at the doorway. For what it's worth, I wish I'd been more like you. I smiled faintly. No, you don't. And then she was gone. When the sound of her car faded, I opened the box. Inside were fragments of the life I'd built for them, old bank receipts, thank you cards, a photo of all four of us at Christmas. We looked happy in that picture, glossy, fake happiness. But underneath the plastic smiles, I saw it now, I'd been fading even then. I held the photo for a long time, then slipped it back into the box. I didn't need to burn it or bury it. Some ghosts don't deserve exorcism, they deserve acknowledgement. That night, I walked through the house one more time. Each room carried its own kind of silence now, clean, soft, earned. I stood in the doorway of the master bedroom and whispered, "It's over." But the house didn't answer. It didn't need to. I climbed into bed, listening to the rain outside. No fear, no noise, just the steady rhythm of something beginning again. And for the first time in my life, I fell asleep without replaying the sound of a door shutting in my face. When I woke at dawn, sunlight streaming through the curtains, a new message waited on my phone, from an unknown number. This isn't over, Elena. There are things you don't know about the house. Call me before you regret keeping it. The text glowed on my screen like a bruise that wouldn't fade. There are things you don't know about the house. Call me before you regret keeping it. I stared at it for a long time, heart thudding slow and steady. The number wasn't saved. No name, no hint. For a second, I wondered if it was Mara, but the phrasing was wrong. She would have called, not warned. I typed back before I could second guess it. Who is this? No answer. I waited. The minutes dragged. Outside, the early sunlight was thin and gray, slipping through the blinds like something uncertain of its place. I tried to tell myself it was a bluff. Maybe someone from my family, trying to scare me into selling. Maybe Wallace, clutching at the last shreds of their pride. But something about that message, it wasn't about guilt. It was about knowledge. The kind that unsettles foundations. By noon, curiosity had me pacing the living room. I finally called Clark. Did you give my number to anyone? I asked. No. Why? I hesitated. I got a message. Someone said there's something about the house I don't know. Her voice sharpened. Did they identify themselves? No. Then don't respond again. If it's intimidation, we'll trace it. If it's real, they'll contact me next. Clark, what could they mean? The paperwork's done. Everything's legal. I've learned something from this line of work, Elena, she said. People never hide money without hiding secrets too. Be careful. She hung up before I could ask more. That evening, I was sorting through the last of the boxes Mara had brought when I found a small manila envelope taped under the bottom flap. It had been hidden so deliberately that I almost missed it. Inside were 3 old property documents, one from 15 years ago, before I bought the house. The name printed on it wasn't mine, or my parents'. It was Robert Langford. I frowned. Who the hell is that? Attached was a faded note in my father's handwriting. Keep this quiet. He doesn't know about the secondary lien. It'll pass to the next owner. A chill crawled up my spine. Secondary lien. That meant debt. A silent claim. something that survived ownership transfers. I stared at the signature line. It wasn't released, not notarized, nothing to show it had been cleared. The date? 3 months before I'd signed my first mortgage payment. They hadn't just used me to pay for the house. They'd used me to cover someone else's hidden debt. I felt the blood drain from my face. Oh, God. I called Clark immediately. She picked up on the second ring. What happened? I told her everything, the name, the note, the lien. She was silent for a long moment. Then, send me photos. Now. I snapped the images and sent them. Another pause, longer this time. Elena, this could complicate things. If that lien was never cleared, technically the house had an undisclosed claim. Your parents concealed it from the bank, and from you. My pulse hammered. Does that mean I don't own it? Not exactly. You still own it. But if this Langford person, or his estate, comes forward, they could demand payment. Depending on the amount, it could reopen proceedings. How much? She hesitated. We don't know yet. I'll dig into the county records. Stay calm. Don't call your family. Don't post anything. Let me handle it. After she hung up, I sat there in the fading light, staring at the papers spread across my floor. Every victory I'd earned suddenly felt fragile again. Like I'd climbed out of a hole only to find another beneath it. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking of the phrase my father had written, he doesn't know about the secondary lien. He doesn't know. That's what they'd been doing for years, keeping me in the dark, feeding me fragments of truth while they made deals in shadows. Even now, even in defeat, they still found ways to haunt me. At 2 a.m., another text came through, from the same number. You're not safe in that house until you pay what's owed. This time, anger overtook fear. Who is this? I typed back. What do you want? The reply came instantly. I want what your father promised me. I froze. My throat went dry. Robert Langford, I whispered. The next message confirmed it. He used your name, Elena. You paid for my silence. I stared at the screen, my hands trembling. This wasn't a ghost, it was a debt collector. A man my father had owed. A man whose secret I'd unknowingly funded for years. At sunrise, Clark called again. I checked the county archives, she said. Langford filed a lien against your father's old business. It was attached to this property as collateral. It never cleared. My stomach turned. So what happens now? She sighed. We negotiate. The good news, he can't take the house. The bad news, he can demand repayment or court action. But if that note proves your father hid it from you, we can file a fraud defense. It's manageable, but it's another storm. I laughed weakly. Of course it is. Elena, Clark said, her voice gentler now, this doesn't undo your victory. It just shows the kind of rot you came from. You inherited truth, not debt. I didn't answer. I couldn't. Because deep down, I finally understood something horrifying. All those years I'd spent paying for the house, my family wasn't just taking advantage of me. They were keeping the wolves fed, using me as the offering. I went outside and stood in the yard, the morning air cool against my face. The house looked the same, but it felt different now, like it was holding its breath. I whispered into the quiet, what else did you hide from me? No answer, of course. Just the wind pushing against the eaves. Still, I knew this wasn't the end. The house might have been mine in ink, but its past still belonged to them, and to the man my father had betrayed. As I turned back toward the door, my phone buzzed again. You have 7 days. Then I come to collect. I stared at the screen, heart pounding, the words blurring in the morning light. The message ended with a single line that made my blood run cold. Your father said you always pay your debts. The week that followed blurred into a strange stillness, the kind that exists between ending and aftermath. The house, once full of echoes, now breathed with an eerie calm. I lived inside that silence, waiting for the next knock, the next message, the next demand that I somehow pay again. But it never came. Not immediately, anyway. Clark worked relentlessly. She traced the paper trail of the lien, the business account, every signature my father had buried under charm and deceit. She called me every morning, her voice steady, factual, grounding me. "Elena," she said on the third day, "Langford died last year. The messages are coming from his son. He's inherited the claim, but he doesn't have legal standing to collect until the court approves it." "So he's bluffing," I said. She paused. "Half bluffing. The debt existed, but it's tied to your father personally, not you. Still, we'll close it formally so he can't haunt you again." I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that ghosts could be reasoned with, that ink and signatures could undo curses whispered through generations. But that night, I walked through the house and felt something I hadn't felt since the day I moved back in. The air felt aware. Like the walls were remembering. Every room seemed to whisper, "You thought you were free." On the 7th day, the doorbell rang. Not a message. Not a call. A knock, slow, deliberate. I opened the door expecting a courier, maybe even Clark's assistant. Instead, a man stood there, gray suit, briefcase in hand, expression unreadable. "Ms. Vance?" "Yes?" He held out a folder. "I'm here on behalf of the Langford estate. I believe we have unfinished business." My mouth went dry. "You're his son." He nodded. "Elliot Langford. I'm not here to threaten you. I just want closure." I hesitated. "What does closure mean to you?" He studied me for a moment, then said quietly, "My father loaned your father money, substantial money, under a false property deal. When your parents defaulted, your name appeared on the mortgage as guarantor. You paid without knowing it. I found the records after my father's death. I came to see if you even knew." I felt the room tilt slightly. "I didn't." He looked down, almost embarrassed. "Then I'm sorry. You were never supposed to. My father wanted repayment, not revenge. I just wanted to understand why he wrote, in his final note, she didn't deserve it." The words hit me harder than any gavel, any judgment, any threat. She didn't deserve it. I opened the door wider. "Come in." He stepped inside, glancing around the bare living room. "You kept it simple." "It's quieter that way," I said. We sat at the table. He opened the folder, old contracts, notes, payment slips, letters between him and my father. Each page was another brick in a wall I hadn't built but had lived behind for years. When he finished, he slid one paper toward me. "This releases any claim against you or this property. I just wanted to hand it to you personally." I stared at the document. "That's it?" He nodded. "Debt closed." I signed, and he countersigned. The sound of pen on paper felt final, almost sacred. As he stood to leave, he looked at me one last time. "You know," he said, "you're not the only one they lied to. My father trusted yours once. It ruined both our families." "I know the feeling," I said. He gave a small nod, then walked out into the fading sunlight. When his car disappeared down the street, I stood there for a long time, the release form trembling in my hand. That night, I burned the last of the documents, the fake deed transfers, the hidden loan, even Mara's cruel letter. I watched the paper curl and blacken, each flame consuming another version of my past. When it was done, I stepped outside. The air smelled like rain and smoke and something clean underneath it all, freedom, maybe. I sat on the porch steps, the same place where I once begged to be let back in, and whispered to the night, "No more debts." For the first time, I meant it. Days passed. The calls stopped. Clark sent confirmation that the Langford estate had withdrawn any legal interest. Mara never contacted me again. My parents moved out of state, leaving behind silence, and maybe their shame. The house became mine, not just in title, but in spirit. I started repainting the walls, planting small flowers out front, opening the windows every morning. Each act felt like reclaiming a piece of my own story. Sometimes, when the wind shifted, I could almost hear echoes of old voices, familiar, tired, fading. I didn't silence them. I let them drift through. They were reminders, not hauntings. The law had given me justice, but solitude gave me understanding. You can't rewrite the past, but you can stop paying rent to it. One evening, I found myself writing without meaning to, scribbling on an old notebook Clark had left behind. Not a diary entry, not a confession, just a truth I wanted to leave somewhere safe. I learned that blood isn't thicker than debt. That love without fairness is just ownership. And that silence, once weaponized against you, can become your defense. I closed the notebook, placed it on the windowsill, and let the wind lift its pages slightly, like even the air wanted to read it. The house was quiet again, but it no longer felt lonely. It felt waiting, alive, like it finally belonged to someone who could keep it honest. A week later, Clark called one last time. "It's over," she said. "Every file closed, every payment settled. What will you do now?" I looked around the sunlit living room, the home I'd built twice, once with pain, and once with truth. "I think," I said softly, "I'll stop surviving and start living." Clark smiled on the other end. "You've earned that." When the call ended, I stepped outside and locked the door behind me. The new lock clicked softly, a sound I'd come to love. Finality, protection, choice. The world outside shimmered with possibility. I didn't know where I was going yet, but for the first time, the question didn't scare me. I turned back toward the house one last time and whispered, "Thank you for keeping my secrets." And for once, the house stayed silent, not in cruelty, but in peace. The story ends with Elena fully reclaiming her life and identity. After discovering her father's hidden debt and the lingering lien, she confronts the final secret tied to her home. The truth emerges not as another betrayal, but as a mirror of her endurance, proof that she has survived every layer of deceit. When the son of her father's creditor releases her from the last financial tie, Elena finally feels free. She burns the remnants of her past and chooses solitude as her form of victory, turning silence into ownership and peace. The inheritance that once destroyed her family becomes the foundation of her independence. The house, once a cage, becomes sanctuary. She ends her narration softly, not in triumph, but in wholeness. "I paid for this house in more ways than one. But I earned every piece of it."